Well, this Monday is a little bit different because it's of course St David's Day here in Wales and we're celebrating all things Welsh. So I couldn't think of anything better to have than a wonderful Welsh Pembrokeshire grown fresh daffodil. Now they're not quite all open yet, but you'll get to see how to arrange them without using floral foam because the soft stemmed, very hollow daffodil doesn't particularly enjoy being put into floral foam. So for a change today, I'm going to show you how you can use some of the copper mesh. So this is bronze net copper mesh. It's a product by Oasis, or you could use some type of wire netting or some chicken wire if you've got it at home. I'm going to show you how just a simple layer of this placed on top of your container will hold your materials into place. So I've just got quite a deep-ish bowl. This is a pasta bowl, nothing too elaborate, something that you might already have at home. And you have to imagine that this is filled with water. Occasionally I'm going to tip it forward and we don't want to have any disastrous scenes while we're filming. So imagine it's filled with water and I'm going to start by using some of the, this is just the common ivy that we find in the UK. I'm just going to create almost a grid or a support system, almost like a cushioned effect throughout the container. Nothing too elaborate. I'm not following any rules or any guidelines here. Just a nice clean cut on the stem end to enable it to take up the water. And what I'm doing is I'm using the grid as support to hold those materials into place. They cascade beautifully, so for me I'm going to make use of the shape of the foliage draping over the edge. That will help to soften my container because the white base can be quite visually dominant sometimes when you're arranging. Now my container is obviously quite low down, but if you don't have this type of base to work with, just find anything you might have in the house. A large jug or a basin, even a cereal bowl, soup bowl, something smaller. This is an interesting shape because it's almost going around the corner. So I'll keep that on the main stem and we'll bring that in from the side. So if I just tip that forward, you'll see that it's nothing too technical. I've almost tried to complete copy the shape of my bowl underneath and keep it circular in its style. Now what I'm not going to do for a moment is cut my daffodils. I have already conditioned them and what I now am going to do is just work them through the grid. So the holes in the copper mesh are going to support my little daffodils and I'm just going to work my way through using them at the height that I bought them from the shop, and these have come from my local supermarket. I haven't got any here at the moment in the studio, so it's just a little idea of what you could do if maybe you had daffodils in the garden. If you don't have daffodils, you could do this quite easily with garden flowers. There might be tulips in your garden at the moment, even if you have very small stems like snowdrops or bluebells when they start coming out later in the year. This is a brilliant technique because the soft stem flowers and nearly all of the spring flowers are a good example of flowers that are soft stemmed. They really dislike going into floral foam. Their poor little soft stems aren't strong enough to hold up in the foam. Now the reason that I'd said I'm not going to cut them, although some of them are looking a bit scruffy, so I have chopped those. The reason that I'm suggesting you don't cut them is because the daffodils exude a very sticky sap from the bottom of the stems, and once you recut those stems, that sap will leak out into the water and it'll clog up all the other flowers that you're putting in your arrangement. For me today, I'm just using daffodils, so it's not quite so important. it won't affect the ivy too much because the ivy is quite strong and robust. But if you're mixing your daffodils with other flowers, you need to cut them, leave the daffodils in a bucket of water on their own overnight for a good 12 hours before you consider arranging them in with other flowers. And then I would suggest you don't recut them, because the minute you cut the stems, that sap starts to seep out to the bottom of your daffodils, and it will unfortunately clog up the stems of any other flowers. So anything that I've got here that's where the stem is a little bit squashed or a bit damaged, you can see that one there, I have recut. I'm almost using this bunch of daffodils in the length that they were bought from the shop. And what I'm going to do with this one, because we need some colour here in the centre, I've got lots of length and lots of height. Now I need to introduce some varying lengths. I'm going to cut this sort of smaller bunch, 6 or 7 stems there, shorter, more towards the middle. So I introduce some recession, some lower down placements of flowers, so that it creates a lot more interest. And again, I'm just working my way through a really quick and simple one that you can do at home. Now you could, if you want to add some more foliage in at this point, I've just used a simple display around the outside. Oh, we've got one more it's not a tulip, one more daffodil that we can pop in. Now, I've been lucky enough to find, these are catkins from the alder tree. I keep going to call them larch, but this is from the alder. And you'll see on this one, if you recognise that, that's the alder cone. And in the spring, we have these wonderful green, almost a mossy green in colour, catkins. And I'm going to add these in to give us a variety in texture. Quite gently add those in so we're not damaging the daffodils. Now I've made this facing you, but you could of course do this all around, and you could place it in the bottom, or on the top of a coffee table. You wouldn't want to place it on the bottom. And I'm not looking directly at it while I'm making it, so I'm hoping from your side it looks quite attractive. Just a soft, any type of pussy willows, catkins, anything you might be able to get hold of. And hopefully you've made yourself quite a quick and simple arrangement to help us celebrate St. David's Day. And now we've had a quick change. I've got the same flower content, so we've still got that lovely catkins, those draping gorgeous catkins. I've got the same quantity of daffodils, and I still have the very traditional ivy that we find growing in the UK. But this time I've got a taller vase, and I've created a framework on the top so that we get some interesting textures and colour combinations working our way through on the top. And I've used the same copper mesh, so we'll do a close-up of this in a photograph so you can see how it's worked. But underneath I have the same copper mesh as I showed you in the video prior to this, and I've used it to weave through some really textured moss and some of the cotoneaster, which is a shrub that you might have in the garden. This one is a gorgeous cotoneaster that grows very close to where I live, and it drapes and hangs down a wall, so it's always very flexible and has a lot of movement in it. Some of the cotoneasters grow horizontally, they can be quite stiff and very rigid, and they wouldn't work quite so well, but you could use some long lengths of variegated ivy to create exactly the same effect. And what I've done is I've made sure that copper mesh sits comfortably on top of my container, and I've cut a hole in the centre of it this time so that I have room to put the stems of my flowers in. And I'm going to do really the same sort of design. Imagine again that there's water in the bottom of that container, and I'm going to start with my pieces of the ivy. They sit quite comfortably on the outside, helps to soften the edge. And this time it's more of an all-round design, so I'm aiming this time to have the ivy draping all round the container to make it more circular. And I'm going to have a few of the thicker pieces up through the centre just to give me some height there. And even though this is a short piece of ivy, I'm hoping that when the vase has been filled with water, there will be enough length in that so that it can take up a water source. But obviously I can see, because it's a clear container, when I come to add the water to make sure there's enough in there to feed and keep my foliage nicely hydrated. So if I just lift the framework up, you can see how it's all sitting really nicely on that framework. Hopefully all my stems are in there. And this time I don't have to feed my daffodils through the grid. I've just got that clear hole there in the centre. So I'm going to use my daffodils. I can put them in clusters this time and almost sit them so they're creating a circle type effect. Some of them are obviously a lot shorter because I used them in the video beforehand. But as long as they take up water and their stems are in the bottom where the water source is, they're all going to be fine. And if you're not very good at arranging, this is a brilliant one for you because you don't really have to think too hard about what you're doing. We're just creating a mass of heads there in the centre. So similar but different. Now I've picked up, this is 2 bunches of daffodils. They are still a little bit on the, maybe on the more expensive side. They will come cheaper as we go further into March. Lots of flowers at the moment are slow coming through. We've had a couple of problems with the supply chain due to the COVID vaccine. Not as many flowers and plants were planted back in the planting season. So some flowers are a little bit more expensive maybe than they would normally be this time of the year. We've had some problems with weather throughout different parts of the world, but hopefully it'll soon all work itself correct and work its way back to normal. There, so this time we have a bigger concentration of the yellow there in the centre. And while we were talking about colour on the Friday night talks, the Friday flower talks, I mentioned that yellow is a very luminous colour, so it's very bright, very vibrant, and this can be seen from a much longer distance. So this would be a far better colour to have if you were creating designs in a dark environment. Much better than those blues or the dark sort of shades of purple. And because I've used the ivy there underneath, it almost acts as a support to hold those, I keep going to call them tulips, and they're not tulips, they're keeping those daffodils into place. And then just again to bring in some texture, some downward movement, a different shape, I'm going to bring in the little catkins all the way around to help create that circular effect. And hopefully in a very quick space of time we've got a beautiful, quite dramatic design just using all of one type of flower. So all, nearly said it again, daffodils. They're not tulips. Gorgeous Welsh daffodils help me celebrate St David's Day. So this time, instead of having cut daffodils, I've got planted narcissi. So this time it's the very small, delicate tate-up-tate. And you'll see that they're still in their pot form. So this would be the type of plant that we would buy either to enjoy them in the house or for you to plant outside in garden pots or even the garden. But you might be able to tell that both plants are growing in almost a strange shape, and that's because when I put them into my work van to bring them here to the studio, they fell out of the container and they ended up on their side, and they're trying to grow towards where they think the light is going to be. So they have this very strange curve to them. So you'll see with the narcissi, especially this one, the curve is far more pronounced. But if I take that home today and the light is coming from this side, it will straighten off quite quickly, and it will almost correct itself back at home. And I'm just going to show you a way of quite simply using a container. It doesn't have to be a crate like this. It could be a box of some description. You might have a lovely window box. Sometimes we have herbs delivered in these attractive crates and boxes. So I'm just going to show you a quick way of making those a little bit more attractive for you to use at home. Now you'll see with this one, it's a waterproof container, so you can see the plastic liner of the container, which unfortunately can be a little bit distracting. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to pull the liner up. Now you could remove the liner completely, but I will probably be using this with floral foam in it at some point. And I'm just going to use some of this green wrapping. Now this is flower wrap that we use to wrap around gift bouquets. And what I'm going to do is just place it inside the container, front and back. Takes a little bit of fiddling around with. And what that will do is hopefully, when I push it back down, it will prevent you seeing so much of that plastic liner. Now again, you could spend a little more time than me making sure that's perfect. This side, do with some more coming around. And I'll just show you. So that side now we've almost completely covered. I could do with one more piece possibly to cover that side. We haven't quite got enough length on that side there, so an extra piece would be wonderful. And instead of having that plastic liner showing through, we've now got some textural, far more natural material, far more in keeping with my little narcissi. And we're going to just place those quite comfortably into the container. Now when I get it home, the window ledge is going to be behind me here, so they'll straighten up and look far more attractive. And then I'm going to use the moss. So this is sphagnum moss. Now you can't go out and collect this because it is an endangered species, it's a protected species. We buy it in from suppliers that are regulated. But if you've got a garden, a very mossy part of your garden, you can quite often rake some of this up. If you don't have moss like I have, you could use some gravel or some aggregate. You might have some decorative stones or chip-ins, little pebbles. Just again helps to make it far more natural in its appearance. Hides that plastic container and the top of the soil. You could have even used some of the material that I've used on the bottom, but that will give me much more interesting texture to work with. And then I have plenty of stems of the birch. Now you'll see me use this quite a lot. For me it's springtime, and it's the time of the year that we should be using all these different types of branches, pussy willows, catkins, anything really that symbolises spring and gives you that lovely spring feeling. And all I'm doing with these is inserting them into the compost of the individual potted plants. It's doing two things. It gives me some support for those little narcissi that are flopping forward, and it also elongates the arrangement, so it makes it far more impressive, and it gives you that lovely spring feel to it. Now I of course as a commercial florist can buy these twigs quite easily, but if you're at home or you're out having a walk, just pop out. It doesn't have to be birch, it can be anything that you can get hold of. It can be old twigs from last year when you've been cutting your plants back. And again, very quickly and quite simply, we've got a fun little arrangement for a gift for a friend or something for you to have in the house. So I hope you've enjoyed something different this week. 3 ideas to celebrate St David's Day here in Wales. Don't forget, if you've been enjoying the video, to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment as well so that I can see how and the videos that you're enjoying the most. And pop back on Wednesday because we hopefully will have another Wednesday video. And Friday, we're a bit behind on our Friday talks because we've had a very busy week, but hopefully we'll be back with Friday Flower Talk. See you soon. Bye for now.